Hey there, it's Brian Sebastian, Movie Reviews and More, Women on TV.tv, Worldwide TV Network, ITV247 out of Franklin, Tennessee, and iHeartRadio on all the platforms around the world. So today is a special show. This is something that I've been looking forward to since I met this young man. It's one of the things where a lot of people are suffering from anxiety, depression, things, how to deal with things. But it also, here's the kicker. When I went into I had no idea that he had all of these people chiming in from around the world. And I thought that was just fabulous. All right. So, Russell, tell us who you are and where you're coming from.
Sure. I live in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada, just above Seattle. I'm a medical doctor, neuroscientist, had a background in developmental psychology. And I've got a real ethereal side too. I'm like an intuitive. I'm not psychic, but I'm intuitive. I kind of help people with anxiety and help remove their blocks to loving themselves, which is really what anxiety comes from. Growing up, my father had schizophrenia, bipolar. So my house was kind of full of chaos when I grew up. So I really never felt like I got seen, heard, and felt. So I really got very good at reading other people. And it's only been in the last few years that I've really learned how to give myself what I need and heal my own anxiety. And that's why I wrote this book called Anxiety RX. And yeah, it's doing great. Like I just got a message from someone in Australia saying that the book was quoted in some newspaper article there. So it's going around the world, which is fantastic.
What's that feel like for you, knowing that your book is getting out there and actually that it's helping people? What's that feeling like? Oops, did I? What's that? What's
it's just not
feeling
my
that
day.
your book is getting out there and everything?
Yeah, you just cut out there. I'm just wondering if my Ethernet cable is plugged in, so I'm not really sure why. It's been just a really weird day, Ryan. It's been a really strange day around here. So I didn't get any of that. You sort of cut out on me. Sorry. It was probably a great question and I just missed it.
Well, I wanted to know, what's it like to be quoted like that, to see your book getting out there in different ways? What's that feeling for you like?
Yeah, it's great. Like I really poured my life's work into this because I really feel like I've got a very different pedigree. One of the things I like to say is that I know more about anxiety than from more perspectives than anyone else in the world because I lived with it for 30 years. And then I lived at a temple in India for a while. I've done MDMA, LSD, psilocybin, ayahuasca, just to examine my own anxious mind. It wasn't to get high. It was to try and, so I have the science side of me. And I also have this very sort of more ethereal side too. And sometimes they fight with each other. But I really wanted to find out what was happening in my mind and body that was giving me so much anxiety, because back in 2013, I was practically suicidal. I left my practice. I ruptured my left Achilles tendon. I was already burned out of medicine. And I just thought, well, what's the point of living if you're going to live in a 12-hour panic attack every day? So I gradually, got my way out of that. Psychedelics certainly helped me understand. And then once I realized that my anxiety had more to do with old stored trauma in my body than the thoughts of my mind, then I really started making some progress in healing. Okay, now I can't hear you again.
Sorry.
That's okay. It's not your fault.
I had to mute it.
The internet.
The funny thing about
sure.
is before you jumped on, I had one of my friends from North Carolina, and she was panicking. She was going through her anxiety. And I'm like, I had to calm her down. This is an everyday existence. This is never going away. And it's gotten worse from the pandemic. But talk about what it was like in 2019. Talk about what it was like 2020 and what it's like now.
Yeah, I mean, 2019, we were really starting to divide as a population. Like if you look at US politics, I mean, I was reading something the other day that said that people are not so concerned about moving their own party ahead. Now it's about criticizing and bringing the other party down. So now we're getting into this environment where, and I think social media has a lot to do with that, is that we're getting into this us them mentality. And it's just getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And all anxiety is separation anxiety. I heard that from Dr. Gordon Neufeld, who I've done a fair amount of work with at the Neufeld Institute over in Vancouver. And he says all anxiety is separation anxiety, mostly separation from yourself, but also separation from other people too. So we are organisms of attachment in a world that's coming undone. So we need attachment. The less attachment we get, the more mentally stressed we become. And then my wife, it's a cold, it's not COVID. And so as we get more disconnected from each other, both from inside of ourselves with our own mind and body gets disconnected, and we get disconnected from other people, of course, we're going to get our nervous system is going to go way out of whack. And when your nervous system goes way out of whack, it goes into survival mode. It goes into hypervigilance. It goes into like looking around for threat. And the threat, if there's no threat there, we'll find one. But there's a threat there. I mean, COVID's a big threat. It causes us to be separate from each other, and it causes us to be separated from inside of ourselves. And that creates a tremendous amount of stress. And in some people that shows up as OCD, and some people it shows up as eating disorders, some people it shows up as depression. And in my case, it shows up, in anxiety. So I've seen anxiety, go through the roof in the last, especially the last year. The funny thing about anxiety is that people, it's all anticipatory, like all anxiety, all worries about the future. And once something happens, typically those people with anxiety kind of hone in and they do what they have to do to get through, but they're afraid that it's going to happen again the next time. So it's all about anticipation. And now that we're so separate, we don't have this connection with each other to kind of stabilize our nervous system. And if your nervous system isn't stable, you're going to get unstable thoughts, which further destabilize your nervous system, which further gives you destabilizing thoughts. So it just becomes this, alarm in the body, activating the thoughts of the mind, and the thoughts of the mind activating the alarm in the body. So it just becomes this cycle. So what I propose is that we have to break the cycle. We have to really connect with our body, connect with ourselves, and give ourselves the attachment that perhaps we're not getting from the outside.
The interesting thing about that is I'm talking to so many people outside the US. I'm not sure if people outside the US are worse, or the Americans are worse, or if it's even keel. What do you think it is? Are Americans, are we worse?
Well, there's the, more prominent that has something to do with that. He certainly didn't start it, but he certainly has this sort of divisive effect on the population. I mean, if you look at, the way that the population is going, we in Canada, we look, in the States, and we see all the division there, as the Americans are in it. I don't think they see it as much, but we definitely see an us, them mentality, especially Republicans, Democrats, climate control, no climate control, gun control, no gun control, abortion, no abortion. It's so, everybody's so factioned out now. I think it's really hard for the people to form a consensus and come together as a people to actually do something, because everybody's so factioned out now, factionated and fractionated out, that it's hard to come together. And that's just a metaphor for how internally split we are. So when you're split inside, of course, it's going to get worse. So I think United States probably has a bigger problem than other countries. Like if you look at Mexico, they have a tremendous amount of poverty there, but there's a lot of family connection. People are connected to each other, and they don't have nearly the same anxiety and depression rates that they do in North America. So there's pros and cons to both sides. So I think the States has a massive problem with the anxiety and depression. I mean, the stats are that 25% of women, I believe, I hopefully get this right, 25% of women between the ages of 25 and 55 are on some kind of psychiatric medication in the United States. That's a huge number.
Wow, that's pretty deep. Wow, and I deal with a lot of women, and that's who I'm making.
So you're frozen, so I'm going to keep talking. So what happens is, as we take more medications to kind of more normal, it's artificial. Like that medication doesn't actually heal the underlying trauma. And a lot of us had trauma when we were younger that is bubbling to the surface now with this COVID epidemic. What we were I saw people sort of, kind of cruising along, doing okay, managing their stress. And then you throw COVID in there, and the ones that were managing before have now fallen below that. And now, just about everybody's feeling some sort of detachment and some sort of fear. And as a population, that just makes the us them mentality more prominent. You know, when you feel stressed, you want to know that your worldview is accurate. So you will tell yourself that your worldview is accurate, and anyone who disagrees with that worldview is the enemy, which further splits us up, which splits us up from ourselves, which splits us up from, you know, inside of ourselves as well. And of course, anxiety has to come from that because our nervous systems are completely out of whack.
You know, and it's what you say with the amount of women like that, man, that is not good. I mean, most of my friends are women, and I'm hearing it from them, and it's just not good. And what you talk about with all of those things like that, I mean, I noticed it. I really noticed it in your clubhouse. But first of all, show your book again. And I want to get a good look at your book because I don't have it, but I think that's important.
Sure. I'll send it to you, Ryan.
Having people pick up your book, go and buy it, be quoted from that. What's that feeling like for you personally?
Oh, it's great. It's great validation because it's you know, what I talk about is very non-traditional. It's you know, most of psychiatry and psychology is very cognitive. It's very, you know, you can think your way out of a feeling problem. One of the things I often quote, and one of the things I get quoted on a lot is this quote that I made, which is, you can't think your way out of a feeling problem. So we're trying to use the mind and a problem with overthinking of the mind, which is what anxiety is, with more thinking. And that doesn't work. We really have to find the root cause, which is this, what I believe is this unbalanced body. And this is what I saw in LSD when I took LSD when I was, you know, at my almost at my lowest point in my life. And it showed me that what I thought was my anxiety in my mind was actually a state of unregulated energy from my childhood that was never resolved. You know, that feeling of chaos coming from my father, never knowing when he was going to go crazy, lose his mind. He would go manic or depressed or, you know, psychotic. And as a teenage boy, that's very destabilizing. So I found that what happened was that energy, because it was too much for my child mind to bear, got sequestered, or Freud would call it repressed, into my body. And the body is the representation of the unconscious mind. So it's not surprising to know that you can find it in your body. So I created this, I hate to use the term method, but I've created this method where you find your old trauma in your body and you heal that. You connect with that. You love that. You use other people to help regulate your nervous system to calm that down. And as that is the engine of your negative thoughts, if you take the gas out of the engine, the negative thoughts just disappear. I see so many people trying to fix, you know, negative thinking with more thinking, or positive psychology. And it's very, very difficult to think in opposition to how your body feels. How your body feels will dictate how you think. Now, you can improve your body temporarily by thinking positive, but it's a tremendous amount of work for people that have an old trauma. You know, it's like it would be like if we lost the impulse, the automatic impulse to breathe, and we had to consciously think to breathe every single time. Like, it's so hard to keep thinking positive when your body has got this energy that keeps dragging you down. And going back to your other point about women and being on medication, men are also on medication too, but it's alcohol.
He was talking about alcohol.
Illegal substances to cope, and men who are just as bad off take illegal substances to cope. I mean, not that alcohol is illegal, but men are. We self-medicate. We don't go and seek help. Women are you know, 8 times more likely to seek therapy than men are. So, you know, men are hurting too.
Wow. Let's talk about this. Talk about your clubhouse meetings. Why they're relevant, why they're important, why you get so many in there. And people were not disappearing. There was more people coming in. I was keeping track. I was like, wow,
Yeah.
great following. Talk about that.
Well, I mean, I'm speaking a little quickly today because, as I said earlier to you before we started taping, is my mother broke her hip. She broke her hip 4 months ago. She broke her right hip. 2 nights ago, she broke her left hip. I shouldn't laugh, but it's,
Wow.
you know, it's very stressful. And we have a new puppy around the house and that kind of thing. But getting back to Clubhouse, I'll try and speak with my Clubhouse voice. So in Clubhouse, I do a room every Sunday at noon Pacific time. about anxiety, and you can ask me anything about anxiety, and people come up and they say, you know, I've seen therapy, I've done this, I've taken this medication, and I'm not getting better. Of me will say, well, what happened to you when you were 6? Like, I see, did your dad leave when you were 6? And she said, yeah, my parents got divorced. My dad got another, you know, a job out of state or whatever. And so I can see these things in people. And then what I do is I find where they feel that pain in their body, you know? So I say, okay, let's go back to your dad leaving. Do you have a memory of your dad leaving? And, you know, maybe they'll say, yeah, I remember just going out to the garage and seeing his car wasn't there. It's like, okay, let's just take you back to that moment. If you're okay, you know, with that, because I always check to make sure, because I don't want to, you know, overly trigger someone, but I want people to pick a trauma that isn't the worst trauma of their life, but something that's really bothered them. And then that's what I use to hone in. I said, no, now scan between your chin and your pubic bone and kind of see if there's an area that kind of lights up. It may feel like a breakup pain or whatever, but just see if there's an area that has more pressure or pain or heat or cold. And then say, well, and they'll say, okay, well, I feel it kind of in my solar plexus. And I'll say, okay, how big is it? Is it like a potato or is it like a cantaloupe? Like, how big is it? It's like, oh, it's about the size of a fist. Okay. Does it have a sharp border around it, or is it kind of amorphous like a jellyfish? It's like, oh, it's kind of like a jellyfish. And then does it radiate? Like, does it go into your back or your throat? It kind of goes up into my throat and pushes on my heart. Okay. So that's what I call your alarm. You know, I've done it very quickly here, but usually I take it a lot slower in Clubhouse. So put your hand over that area and then, you know, maybe do some small circles over that and just feel your own compassionate touch. Because a lot of times when we go through these traumas when we're younger, there's no one to tell. There's no one to share this with. Alone. So what I get people to use is their adult self now via sensation. And there's other methods that I use too, to just connect with that spot, because the body is the representation of the unconscious mind. If you can find that spot, which I believe may well be a conduit back to that younger, you know, that younger self, that, you know, go back to when you were 6 and you went into the garage and you saw that your dad's car wasn't there. You know, can you just sort of close your eyes? Can you give yourself, you know, the unconditional love and connection now that you needed back then as a 6-year-old? And then I'll say, you know, maybe get a picture of yourself when you were 6 years old and put it up in your bathroom and talk to that younger version of yourself every day, and just show that younger version that you're not back there anymore. You're not a 6-year-old who's helpless, whose father's just left. You're actually an adult now who can look after that 6-year-old. Excuse me. And then, you know, just connect with yourself, because the amygdala, which records, you know, everything that's ever happened to you, even if you're not consciously aware of it, the amygdala will record that, but it has no sense of time. So when something comes into your awareness, like say, if your dad left when you were 6, or your parents got divorced, and now you're going through a divorce, similar feelings will come up, and that amygdala will track you back to that place where you're 6 years old again. So what I want you to do is I want you to find that place in your body, and I want you to really pay a lot of attention to that place. I want you to talk to yourself every day in the mirror if you can. Talk to that child, connect with that child, because that's where the energy of your alarm is stored. That's the root cause. All this thing about, you know, my dad left, I understood why he left, you know, all that stuff. There's a great saying that insight is the popcorn of psychotherapy, which is a great thing. So just knowing why something happened doesn't heal it. It may help you understand it a little better, but you have to heal it through the body. And my wife's a somatic trauma therapist, so I've learned a tremendous amount from her about incorporating the body in the healing of the mind. So that's kind of what I do on Clubhouse, is I talk to people. Sometimes I get an intuitive hit on them, like I can see where, you know, someone lost their dad at 6 years old or whatever. Sometimes I don't. And I just basically talk them through it with this sort of framework that's stored in your body from a time in childhood that you couldn't handle it, from a time that you felt powerless and helpless as a child. Your brain can't handle that, so it stuffs it down, it offloads it into the body, and it stays there until you actually deal with it. And a lot of people don't deal with it until they're 50, 60, 70 years old. And they've had a couple of divorces, they've lost their money. Like there's all this trauma that keeps happening because they haven't really dealt with the underlying trauma of their childhood. And that's why somatic therapy, I think, really helps people understand this is the root cause. Some people it's stored in their throat. If you had some situation where you couldn't say what you needed when you were a child, or you had a parent who was overly domineering, I see a lot of people that hold the alarm in their throat. And as a medical doctor, sometimes I want to have a seizure when I talk about this stuff because it's so antithetical and to what I learned as a medical doctor. So I try and combine what I've learned, with my doctorate in medicine and my degree in neuroscience and that kind of thing, with kind of the more ethereal parts of life and spirit and emotion, and trying to help people understand from a completely different way. And that's what the book is all about. It's like nothing's ever been written on anxiety that's even remotely close to this book. Most people on anxiety stick with a cognitive approach, like, examine your thoughts. Is this thought true? Is this thought real? Well, you're already in survival brain. You're already in alarm. Your physiology is an alarm. So from an evolutionary perspective, you don't have access to your rational brain anyway. When we were being chased by a predator in the savannah 50,000 years ago, we didn't need to know what the lion's motive was, or how our friend was doing with his wife. We needed to just get the hell out of there, right? So it's a matter of bringing your body back online, which brings your prefrontal cortex back online, and then you can kind of process the thought. But trying to process an anxious thought while you're anxious is very difficult because you don't have the rational part of your brain that would do it.
Talk about this. What did comedy do for your head? What did it do for your soul and your heart?
Comedy was great because basically as a left brain analytical physician, who was kind of conservative, I thought in a very left brain linear, logical, analytic way. And what comedy did was it made me think of something different than that. It allowed my brain to go into this creative space. A lot of comedy is taking something that doesn't make sense and making it make sense, or take something that makes sense to us as human beings and making it not make sense. And when that switch gets flipped in people, we laugh. And I think it's just, seeing things from a different perspective, which is much of what I talk about with anxiety, is like seeing things from a different perspective, that anxiety is more of a body-based issue than a mind-based issue. Trying to look at things from a very different direction. There's a comedian, kind of transformational speaker named Kyle Cease. And Kyle, what he does is he says, go to the mirror, say something that you don't like about yourself, and then after that say, and I love that about myself, or and I love that, and so you go to the mirror, you say, I'm a procrastinator, and I love that about myself. And what that does is it, in your own mind, you have the same groove that you go down every time you procrastinate. You berate yourself, you flagellate yourself, like, I shouldn't be doing this, I should be doing something else. But what if you did the exact opposite of that thought? What if you did the exact opposite of what you're judging yourself for? What if you loved yourself for the same things you judge yourself for? And Brene Brown talks about that too. Brene says that you can't heal anything that you continue to judge and shame yourself for, which I agree with. So when you say, and I love that about myself, you start opening the door to a different perspective. And then your brain gets a different perspective, which is basically what comedy did for me. Is it gave me a way of really exercising that sort of creative aspect of me and giving me a different perspective. So I could look at things in a more, sort of 360 way, as opposed to my sort of rigid, logical, left brain, memorize everything from medical school type, that was the form that I learned. And it wasn't rewarding. I was burning out, and I just needed something else to kind of get my creativity back. And if we don't have any creativity, I mean, Ayurvedic medicine, the medicine of ancient India, says that the cure for anxiety is creativity. Now, I'm not sure if it's the full cure, but it certainly helps. And I think one of the things that we are burning out, especially in North American society, is we lose our creativity. We lose our fun. As we get older, there's just so many things that we have to do rather than do things that we want to do and have fun with.
Talk about who are some of your favorite comics and why.
Well, Norm Macdonald just passed away, last week. So that was a tough one for me. Robin Williams was great. Robin, when I did stand up in Vancouver, Robin would drop into this club we did in Vancouver called the Urban Well. And he would often do sets there when he was shooting a movie in Vancouver. And we had a number of chats. And there was one night that the comedians had a contest, and I won. And I still have the card today that says, you won, Robin Williams. And there's a picture of Robin and I around here somewhere. I put it up online a little while ago. Spirit. But Norm Macdonald, I love Norm Macdonald, just the way he, the different ways that he would kind of come in and out of material, and he would just that sort of dry style. Bill Burr, I love. Dave Chappelle, I love. Just people that take what's going on in society and really twist it on its ear and really make us see the ridiculousness of what human beings really are. And being able to laugh at that rather than just, being so wrapped up in your identity politics and so wrapped up in, a lot of comedians aren't even doing colleges anymore because, you can't do it without offending people. And comedy's kind of like the last bastion of free speech, especially in North America. I'm sure it's true in Europe too. But, you can say as a comedian, you were supposed to be able to say, and it's just, I think we're losing so much creativity. We're losing so much of our own individuality by not being able to kind of look at it with fun and poke jest at, some of the things that we do. And I think that's what the comedians that are the best, in my opinion, that I love the most, are the ones that take social norms and just rip them apart. And that's what I love doing, because there is a bit of a rebel in me for sure. And I think that's why I wrote the book as well. Because it's so the opposite of what's normally taught in psychiatry and psychology. And this book, sort of flips all that on its ear too. So I think comedy really allowed me the permission to go against the norm, to go against my conditioning, my conservative conditioning as a white, privileged, male, heterosexual, cis doctor. You don't get a whole lot more privilege than me.
See, and your dog is agreeing with you too. So with that, give your social media links and then show your book one last time.
Sure. So the way to find me is just Google the Anxiety MD. So Anxiety RX is the name of my book. Anxiety RX is also the name of my podcast. And at the Anxiety MD is my Instagram handle. I'm going to do more. It's also my YouTube handle. So I'm going to do more YouTube videos soon. And yeah, that's what I'm about. I really want to change the way that anxiety is understood and treated in the world, because I think the way we're doing it now isn't working. Clearly, the talk therapists have had 50 years to do this, and they really haven't. I did talk therapy for 50 years. It didn't, well, not 50 years, but maybe 30 years. And it didn't really help me that much until I really started to see that the alarm was in my body. And I don't want people to have to suffer with anxiety as I did. I really don't. And I say that a lot on Clubhouse. It's like, I do this because I don't want you to have to suffer with anxiety the way that I did. So.
And with that,
thanks, Brian. I really appreciate just our chat and today, or I was just completely up in the air. You say Mercury's retrograde, so I'm fully behind you on that one. And yeah, I really appreciate the chat.
And with that, I have to always say this: if you see someone without a smile, please give them one of yours, because Dr. Russell Kennedy says so, and I say so too. I'm Brian Sebastian. This is Movie Reviews and More, and we will see you next.